continue to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day.
Welcome to the Fights That Made Me podcast, hosted by myself, Umar. I'm joined by the Saint, GG, George Groves today. Thank you very much for having me over at your lovely residency here in West London. Nice place, George.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're just going to go through the highs and lows in your career, an illustrious career, and there's been plenty of highs and plenty of lows, George. So we'll go to May 2011, a pivotal fight in your career. Retaining the Commonwealth title and winning the British title against James DeGale, majority decision win. Before we talk about the fight itself, one of the best sort of domestic rivalries I can remember. You had plenty, and we'll go through that later on in this podcast. But yeah, that James DeGale fight, the build-up, the rivalry, it seemed intense, real. Just talk to me about that firstly.
Yeah, it was. It really was. So I'm sure those who are listening will know, but me and James came from the same amateur club. Both boxed out of the Dale Youth ABC. James a couple of years older than me. And we both sort of did our own thing. We sparred quite a lot. But James was always a little fat kid, up at heavy 81 kilo, and I was sort of obviously growing. But then at some point we both ended up at middleweight. I was still a junior, I was like 16 years old. I won the schoolboys that year. I was boxing for England, and James had gone to the senior ABAs and won it, which was an amazing feat. You know, back then, it was just the start of like talented juniors going in the seniors and winning them early on, where the talent was coming through. Before then, it was just, you just have 30-year-old grown men, hard, they'd probably come out of the combined services or, you know, just farmers from Somerset or something. They were the guys who were winning the ABAs. So, essentially 2 years on, we go in the ABAs together. I want to win it, he wants to win it, we're the same weight, we have to fight. I win, another majority decision, but always rightly so. And the rivalry is sort of born from there. We don't speak again after that. He goes on, does his thing. I try and do my thing. He ends up getting selected, qualifying for the Olympics and wins a gold medal. So congratulations to him. But sort of really that's when you know the spotlight's going to come on this rivalry, because I'm not going to let that go. I'm still on my new path now, my new journey. I signed pro before he even goes to the Olympics. Knowing that our paths are likely going to cross again. And they do, it comes pretty early on in our careers, really. I think he'd had 10 fights, I'd had 12. Pro for maybe 2.5 years. And it ends up headlining a pay-per-view event, which pretty unheard of, certainly back then, 2011, for non-heavyweights. And yeah, a British title level fight. So a proud moment for both of us. And the rivalry, it definitely caught fire, because I now have to push James's buttons. He's up for it. You know, the general consensus is that he is the future of British boxing, the future of division. But I'm there to upset the apple cart. So. It was really good.
Obviously for yourself, it wasn't made too early because you won the fight and you went on to bigger and better things. And to be fair, even though he lost, he had a great career himself in the professional ranks. But yeah, were you surprised that Frank Warren made that fight that early at that stage? Because it was a massive fight, but I suppose if you built up more, you got probably more pay-per-view buys. But yeah, the timing of that fight.
Yeah, I mean, everyone will have their own take on it. It was originally going to be a Nathan Cleverly headline fight, and it needed a really good supporting fight, I think, for that to have got over the line as pay-per-view. When Cleverly fight couldn't get made. Jürgen Bremen pulled out, or whoever it was. They tried to bring Tony Bellew in. That didn't work. They're still going to go ahead with the pay-per-view. So they probably had a pay-per-view slot that they needed to fill. And back then, it was only Sky who was putting on pay-per-views. They backed DeGale. They really backed DeGale. DeGale backed himself, where before we'd seen Aldi Harrison, who everyone was raving about, but he was very cautious in his career. Amir Khan wasn't cautious, but at times would come unstuck. So they're like, we need to be cautious with these prospects. But DeGale, they backed himself, and I'd had this fight with Kenny Anderson, who was a good fighter, tough fighter, unbeaten fighter, hard man, Scottish guy. And he dropped me in the third round. I had to get off the floor to win. And all of a sudden there was these massive question marks over my head, like, can he take a punch? Is he really going to go this far? Is he just David A's sidekick or friend or whatnot? So I think off the back of that performance, and then DeGale would beat Paul Smith for the British and looked really good. Stopped him over 9 rounds. They made him a heavy favourite. But I knew James. Like this is it's that element of boxing that me now as an analyst watching the boxing, trying to cover the boxing. Sometimes you need to know every little bit, and it's impossible to. Like, people didn't know me well enough. People didn't know the relationship I had with James DeGale. Didn't know what I was made of, what this fight meant to me. How much it meant to me. And I dedicated myself entirely to it. The focus, the drive, the ambition. It was all there, but coping with the pressure. So I got this fight's made. No one was really convinced I could win confidently. I think even down to I was training with Adam Booth. I know he didn't, but he said, right, this is how we're going to fight. You're not going to sit in the pocket and trade with him. We're going to go long range. We're going to just steal the rounds if need be. We're going to win the round by one punch if we need to. And that was really hard for me to take for a long time to settle with, to get my head around. But I'd had fights before, amateur and pro, where I hadn't really listened to the corner from time to time, or thought maybe I know best, and hadn't worked out for me. So, all right, well, this guy's experienced, this guy's been in the pro game longer than me. Adam, I'll listen to him, let's do it. And we did, and we done it. And I had Chris Eubank Jr. coming in with his dad for sparring, and Chris Sr. at the end of every spar would say, you do this and you will lose. Like, it was, I was like, it's Chris Eubank Sr. And obviously you got respect for him for his career, but also he has a presence where he's hard to just fuck off. Do you know what I mean? But it got to a point where I said to Adam, I said, listen, please, I can't hear that one more time from Chris Eubank Sr. Can you please ask him to leave? Because he's like, you've got to go in here, you've got to win every moment, every second of every round. And I get that. But that wasn't the tactics for this fight. This fight was all about concentration. This fight was about not switching off for a second, because it's not necessarily switching off and getting your lights switched off, but if it's that one shot that knocks your head back in a round, that might be all it takes to sway the judges to go, okay, right, he's going to win that round. Because I'm not sitting in the pocket letting my hands go punch after punch after punch. Plus, I know everyone was expecting DeGale to win. Everyone thinks DeGale's going to win. Everyone's looking for the eye-catching shots from DeGale. So when he does land a little flurry, then everyone's waiting for me to get knocked out, because I've just got put my arse against Kenny Anderson, and Kenny Anderson's not the same fighter that James DeGale was. So switched on. It was something that was at that point the hardest thing I'd ever have to do in my career. To work on the concentration, to work on the resilience, the mental toughness. We were doing track sessions where we'd do, I'd do 100 metres sprint, had to do it in about 15 seconds. So it's not like lightning pace. I get 30 seconds off and I go again, but we'd do 120 sprints. So you're talking about like 12k of treadmill sprints, take an hour and 45 minutes. It was brutal. My legs would be bruised at the end of it, but that was just one of the sessions where it was to build the mental fortitude, the mental toughness, and being able to switch on. Because most fighters, it doesn't matter what level they get to, unless they've drilled it before, have lapses in concentration, because boxing just is one of them sports where you get in your flow state, your comfort zone, and all of a sudden you can almost start daydreaming, when really sometimes you got to be on it.
Just the last one on James DeGale. When the scorecards were being read, you were fully confident you were going to get the nod, because it was a close fight in a lot of people's eyes. You were fully confident that was going to go your way.
Yeah, well, I was scoring the rounds as I was going, and I don't usually do that, but I knew this was one of them fights that you do, and I thought I'd won comfortably enough. I thought I'd won. Yeah, I was not a clear winner, but there were rounds where if you were appreciating what I was doing, there's no way you could not give it for me. And then when Jimmy Lennon Jr., who's one of the best announcers there is, when I realised it's a majority decision and there is a winner, like, oh, it's me. And I've never really delved into that thought process properly in my life. I've never gone back and thought, but what if it wasn't me? It was close, but what if it wasn't me? What would that have felt like? What would it have been like? I mean, it would have been, who knows what it would have felt like. But no, I was confident, assured that I'd won, and I watched the tape back, and I'm still happy and content with the win. And I believe I won. There was like no massive scream ups, considering I'm sort of the underdog. If there was any hint that really DeGale won, I think there'd been more of a scream up. But
how do you feel about James now?
James is cool. I mean, it's a weird one. Like rivalry between both of us, rivalry and jealousy. Like that's. I mean, you got to be honest. What it is the bare bones of what it is. And what do we want out of boxing? Do you know what I mean? What do we want out of boxing? If you are fighting for the glory, we've both been through the mill. We've both had it and not. So I think the rivalry's gone. I think there's a case to be made for both of us about who came out with a better career in that regard. I think I did. He'll say he did, but there's nothing, I think, for us both to be all right with each other. But he doesn't do any media. I don't really think he goes to the boxing much. I don't ever see him. When we don't live that far away from each other, but we never cross paths. I'll try and get him on my podcast soon one day, but I don't think it will happen. But yeah, I mean, he's all right, I think. But who knows? Like one day I might sit here and go over a few things and it might be wound up. But that's the same with everyone else. And then sometimes like, let's bury the hatchet, let's shake hands, let's be friends. I might get on with him. And sometimes not. So I think with both, especially with James DeGale, both sides, it might only take like one comment, and then all of a sudden we're back there. We're one instance and we're back in the room. But maybe that's not the worst feeling in the world.
Well, let's move on to another incredible domestic rivalry, but this really captured world boxing's imagination. And after the DeGale one, the rivalry with that, you thought it wouldn't get better, but it really did with these two Carl Froch fights. Start with November 2013. See, a stoppage loss for yourself, but one of the most dramatic fights I've seen, many boxing fans would have seen. And really people still feel aggrieved about that and, feel like you got robbed that night. But yeah, let's talk about the build-up again with that because, yeah, as I said, it was an incredible viewing. Just talk to me about your relationship with Carl pre the first fight.
Yeah, so before the fight had been made, I'd met Carl a few times. We'd sparred a couple of times, but then there was a slight change in the temperature when I think maybe he started to do really well in terms of his commercial profile once he beat Bute, and then I sort of dialed in on he's a target now. He's a target, so. I appreciated him for being aware of me. I think that's just his nature. But yeah, there was a few spats before the fight was even made. I'd gone out and sparred Kessler ahead of his fight with Kessler, which he didn't like. I'm cheeky and obnoxious. Like, if you don't, if someone says something, then I don't bow down. I don't kiss the ring. I don't follow form. Sometimes it served me well. Sometimes it hasn't in my career. Sometimes I think with a bit of hindsight or a bit of maturity or a bit of experience, I thought, well, maybe I didn't need to say those words right there and then. And that's usually always in a business sense, where I'm thinking about the conversation I've had with promoters or managers or TV execs or stuff like this. So I think, just sit on it. Don't need to say that. Fighters, they can just have it. But by the time the fight comes round, I'm still working with Adam Booth. We had our ups and downs, but I think, most of the problems were like my problem or his problem or some other problem. Really, there wasn't any huge problems that were about what problems should really be about the fight or something. Eddie Hearn comes to the gym, David Hayes' gym in Vauxhall. They've got a little office in there, and he said, we'll make you mandatory for Froch's title. Said, we can get an IBF mandatory out. We've gone through the list. I was in at number 6 or 7. I was like, but this one's busy, this one's vacant, this one's fighting each other. Do you want this one? I said, yeah, we'll have this, like 100%. Good for Eddie. It's a domestic dust-up on pay-per-view for Froch. So I'm not sure how much Eddie had really seen of me, studied of me, how much he even knew about boxing at this point. But he made the fight. It's a business sense. It's a good fight. And I'm in, and away we go. They set a date for the press conference, and I fall out with Adam a couple of days before. I said, well, in my brain I'm going, well, if he doesn't come to the press conference, then that's good for me, because that is a clean break. That's me gone. I'm going to do my own thing. Don't need him. I'm under contract with him as a manager, so that's a problem. As in, he can make it difficult. I don't know what he's going to do with this, but trainer-wise, I can train myself if need be. I've got to this stage. Like, this is when you talk to real fighters who have been doing it forever. Been boxing since I'm 10 years old. Like, now I'm 24, I think. So 14 years of living and dying by the sword, like on it every night. First one in the gym, last one out. Turned pro and dedicated everything to it. Travelled the world for sparring, invested money in myself, all for the bigger picture, all to get to the top, to be the greatest of all time. So at this point, I'm not carrying any baggage with me. Like, if there's someone who's not pulling their weight, they're gone. I'll do it myself. I'm ready to go. We show up at the press conference to announce the fight. Obviously, everyone there already knows I've sort of fell out with Adam. Adam has told Eddie Hearn that I'm no longer working with George. Anything to do with this fight, you go direct to him. I'm thinking, right, great, Eddie, can you send me that message, yeah? Because when I tell the board of control he's no longer my manager, he no longer wants to work with me, that message will be really handy. He obviously doesn't do that. But, Carl's there. Carl's ready for the fight. Like, Carl's up for it, and I'm ready for the fight. I've got up there on the train with Elliot Wurzel and my mate Luke. Like, Luke's from my amateur boxing club, he's one of my best mates, and Elliot's a journalist, you know what I mean? But this is my posse, this is it for them. We're ready for the fight. It was lovely. It was great. It was like, as a fighter, like if you are that way inclined as a fighter, being involved in the fight is the best bit. That's your comfort zone. This is where I know. This is where I'm born to be. And then from there, and from right there and then going up on the train, I just remember flicking the switch right into the press conference. Boom, the fight's on now. We're in the fight already. So of course, like, I'm trying trying to portray strength, confidence, self-belief, things that I want other people to sort of buy into and believe. I'd love to leave, if it turns around the first press conference and 15% of the people out there scratching their head going, well, this guy's backing himself. Is something I'm missing here? And then you just got to work on it. It's like trying to win the rounds, try and convince as many people as possible. By the time we get through to fight night, the crowd might be split. So I'm pulling Carl. I'm on Carl. I'm ready for Carl. I'm not there to kiss the ring. I'm not there to say, wow, you're such a good fighter. I'm a big fan. I'll be there to pull him apart. Any mistakes he's ever made, I'm going to jump on him. If he says anything that sounds ludicrous, I'm going to jump on it. And that's how it went from there and then. And then obviously the rivalry real rivalry was probably born from that first press conference. He left spitting feathers. And then it's up to me to sort of run with it. I mean, Sky, who are putting on a pay-per-view event, they love this. You know, they absolutely love it. So every opportunity, there's a camera in his face, my face, anything that can be done that can be a clickbait headline. The byproduct is great for the pay-per-view sales, which is good for the fighters when you're on the percentage of profits. So you don't mind doing it. You're never going to shy away from it. And Cole didn't shy away from any of it in the first fight at least. So yeah, rivalry was born. I was ready for it. I was ready, and then had a good camp. Like not the, I mean, all camps could go better, but I had a really good camp. I brought in Paddy Fitzpatrick, who's a very good coach who I'd worked with a little bit under Adam Booth. At the time, he's an amateur coach in Swindon, but he'd been well travelled. He'd never sort of led a corner, so that was probably the thing that was going against him. He'd always been a second, as far as I'm aware. He'd always been a second, but a good second. He knew boxing, he knew me, and we were ready for Froch. So it was a good little camp. Dan Lawrence, who now works with many fighters. Dan Lawrence I was already working with. He's my strength conditioning coach, and then I brought in Barry O'Connell, who was an ex-Royal Marine, who had a gym in Hammersmith, like close to where my mum lives. Met Barry, and his job was to toughen us up, like get us ready for war.
You certainly were in that first round. Would you say when you dropped him in that moment, in that fight, I mean, you were on fire, George. Was that the best George Groves ever?
Yeah, maybe. In some ways, yeah, some ways not. I mean, that's me with no real baggage and the ultimate amount of spite. By the end, I'm a much better, more rounded fighter. But right there and then, I am, in terms of just the rawness, like I'd peaked in that phase. You know, there's been a lot to refine, but yeah, I mean, I felt like I felt like I was taking on the world and I was going to conquer it. So
did you know that was going to happen? Dropping him in the first round, because you said it.
No, I said I was going to hit him with two right hands. I didn't think I was going to drop him. I thought Froch takes ages. I'm going to wear him down. And I'm happy to beat him on points. I backed my conditioning. Like my conditioning, as I say, I lived and breathed it. There was no cheating, no missing. I had Dan Lawrence in, who was timing me running up Nightingale Lane in Richmond, just like this ridiculous hill every week. Then we'd be on the track a couple of days later. I wouldn't miss one strength, hitting PBs and all that sort of stuff, but feeling good, like feeling great. Made the weight well. I feel like I think I was flying. I mean, I didn't expect to drop him in the first round. I thought I'd land on him. And at some point maybe he'll go. We'll break him down. I'll back my power. But I know he makes mistakes as well. So like he's gung-ho. He crosses his feet when he punches sometimes. He does that in the first round. I catch him cold. Like I do catch him cold. He doesn't look alive on the ring walk. He looks scared. He looks, his pupils are dilated. His face looks a bit gaunt. I think the occasion got to me. I've been on tour with him and he spoke about how You know, he's trying to find. He's got to this point where he thinks he hasn't ticked all the boxes, and really just hasn't mentally prepared for the fight. He's always fit and conditioned. He can't help that. It's just that is his way, but he wasn't ready for the fight. He wasn't ready for the magnitude of this fight. So we catch him, we hurt him, we drop him early, and then we sort of punch him numb. Right hand happy, and especially in the 6th round, just right hand happy. And I take the 7th off, and then this is where Carl the story becomes. But there's nothing in it, you know. And if anything, I know after the 9th it gets stopped to the 9th, and after the 9th I'm going for the big push, 10, 11, 12, and I'm going to win them and win them big, because I don't trust the scorecards. If I sort of take the last half off, you won't see me dancing around sort of showboating in the last round. I'm going to dive on him and hurt him, and I was there at that point believing that I will get him. If anything, I wanted more from him in those sort of 7, 8, even 9 rounds where he'll empty the tank, because as soon as he's gone, like, you just can't keep going. So there's to and fro's in every fight, but yeah, I mean, Howard Foster jumps in and stops the fight. It's bizarre. It is bizarre. I mean, he's made a massive error at that point. And I've seen Howard before. He's ref my fights. He's judged my fights before, since. It's not the British Boxing Board of Control's way to apologise or to say we got that wrong. It is boxing, it's sport. That's what it is. I don't mind. I'll get that.
Have you forgiven him, Howard?
Well, it is what it is. Like, I'll forgive him as in, like, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can sit in a room with him now and I'll shake his hand and say, how you doing? Yeah, I had a picture with him and his son. I think it was his son the other day at one of the shows and that. So there's no animosity. It's not like, oh, I'm sitting there grieving. But if he turns around to me and says he made the right call, I'll say, absolutely fucking not. And then if people will say to me, oh, it's better to stop it 1 punch early or 1 punch late, I'll be like, yeah, but not in that fight. Absolutely not in that fight, because you're moving the goalpost. It's like there's no 1 punch too early. It's like 3 rounds too early. I'd have had to have got pasted for forever, because nothing's landed. It is just really bizarre moment where, and for me, paranoia kicks in. I'm a paranoid person. Boxing makes you paranoid. I'm like, everyone said Groves is strong, fast, might win the early rounds, but Froch will get him late. And as soon as we get into sort of almost the championship rounds, Howard Foster sort of is kicked in. Why has he stopped that fight? So I don't necessarily think, oh, he's looking after the home fighter, or there's a brown paper envelope that's been circulating from Eddie Hearn. I just think that he just made a mistake.
Obviously, that mistake was very, very disappointing for yourself. But the positive to take out from that, it led you on to May 2014, which, looking back, aside from recently with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fights in this country, the biggest fight we've had in recent times in British boxing, as Carl likes to remind everyone, 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium. Again, a stoppage loss for you in that fight. But with the build-up, the one thing that springs to mind was that Rubik's Cube. What was that all about, George?
Yeah, so always trying to keep it a little bit fun, lighthearted, I didn't always succeed, because I think when I finished my career and like people just thought I was miserable, moody, and a bit weird and this, that. But that's what they see most of the time, and that's what you're gonna get. That's what's gonna really drive the fight, is the gloves are off, where you're sitting there and you're having an argument. But I thought Rubik's Cube, this is quite fun. I thought Carl will sit there and he will talk, because he loves to talk. And if he goes on and he wants to take it way back to his 8th fight with some journeyman back in, some sort of working man's club, then I'm getting the Rubik's Cube, but I've got plenty of time. So yeah, got the Rubik's Cube. Solved it. I had Adam Swift sitting next to me, so as soon as Carl started talking, I was like, Pressure was on. I mean, I'm not like a genius like who does it like 8 seconds. I think I got it down to about 2 minutes 20, something like that. So I thought pressure's on. But yeah, managed to get it done, put it down. I thought it was a bit of fun. I thought I'd end up on at the time I was following Lad's Bible, and I thought I'll get on Lad's Bible with this, and they didn't. I was like, you bastards, didn't put me on there. But something different. Always tried to do something different. I had loads of ideas. Some were good, some were bad. The band playing, I think they had there. I'd coming out on a bus, fire breathers. We had a mascot, the Gingerbread Chan. He wrote a comic book series for him. Was writing a sketch show for him. Loads of different things where you try and just be a little bit different, a little bit interesting, and also have a bit of fun. That's what the Rubik's Cube was.
Remember this moment on IFL actually, and really around that time IFL really picked up with interest. Around that rematch with Carl, I say boxing was at its peak moment then in terms of British boxing. That exchange you had that was captured on IFL with Carl's brother Lee, was that? I mean, none of this was fake, was it, George? It was all real.
Yeah. So Lee, who Carl's got more than one brother, but Lee's always with him. Lee, and I've been on tour with Lee now when he comes with Carl, and we get on. He's all right. But at the time, he explains it much better than I ever could that. He was drinking. He was heavily drinking. And he was gambling and a few other things. But he would give me grief. He would always give me grief. And I saw that as weakness. I was like, you got to stick up for your little brother Carl. Like, he's the one who's got to have the fight. Why is big brother here giving me grief? So yeah, at that, I think we're in the pitch at Wembley, and he pipes up, and it's still me. I haven't got a huge team at this point. I mean, there's more of us, but I'm just trying to display control, and I'm up against some influential people. I'm up against Carl Froch, who's had 10, 12, 14 world title fights. Eddie Hearn, who's now the premier promoter on Sky. The guys at Sky. So I'm trying, but I'm at this point. I'm like, Eddie, sort your boy out. And I know boy is really disrespectful, so I've got to say it in a way where people just go, oh, that arrogant little prick. But I've got to, so if I can carry it well enough that I can get Carl to go, oh, he's going to be raging inside that I've mugged him off. Eddie, do this. So I'm telling Eddie what to do, but he's telling everyone it's his show. And this is my show. Welcome to my show. This is my world. You just live in it. And then over to Lee. Me and Lee would go back and forth a little bit. I probably would have punched Lee at that point, not out of emotion. It would have been calculated, which is a bit weird and a bit psychopath. But I would have thought that would upset Carl and then I'd probably get fined by the board, but it'd be peanuts compared to if I can upset Carl. So if it at one point it's something, but there's lots of security here anyway, so I ain't worried about getting cut. And I didn't know he was drunk, but he was drunk anyway, so I doubt he would have been able to do any inflict any damage on me. But he was really riled up. But yeah, so that's just one clip of that point in time.
George, after the heartbreak of the first fight, where many people believe, obviously it shouldn't have been stopped, and you'd have probably won that night. To get then stopped in front of 80,000 people, how was that? I mean, it must have been difficult.
Yeah, no, it was awful. It was awful. The first fight you lose, but everyone thinks you've won, and it's a weird feeling. It's like it didn't feel like a loss. There's so you put them. I suppose, if anything, you probably just bottle up the emotion. There is no emotion; it doesn't come out. The loss at Wembley is totally different. If there was just that without the first fight, you might just be really gutted. Because you're I was in the fight was going well, it was sort of going to plan. The second fight was always going to be technical for the first half, build into it for the second half, right? And maybe there was a bit of paranoia between me and the team that I gas out late, and we didn't want people to think that's what it was. Hindsight, maybe it would have been better to just start the second fight with the first fight finish and just try and jump on him and then try and put him in a panic situation like, oh, he's going to land something big, But we didn't. We went technical, and I made a mistake. And then Carl, to his credit, who was in great shape, mentally switched on for this fight, lands a spectacular punch. I'm in great shape. Like I'm not saying the fight should have gone on, but I'm up before the belt. I'm up before the 10 count. You know, the referee looks at me. I haven't seen it in a long time. I'm not sure if he waves it before I get up, but I'm up. I'm on my feet because I was fit. I was healthy, and at that point, the fight hadn't been that physical. So it was heartbreaking. It was awful because you're like, for a long time I was walking around, and I still do. Until I actually win one, I walk around thinking I'm a world champion without a belt. I'm like, but now I'm in a position where it's failed. Like, I've lost spectacularly. There's going to be a lot of damage control. Like, how do I rehabilitate my credit? You know, my credit from the first fight. And it sort of got to a point where probably gone a bit too big. In terms of trying to display the strength, the confidence, the unwavering self-belief, it sort of got to a point where there was probably a lot of people out there going, oh, he's too arrogant now, I hope he gets beat. And then I do. So, as I say, there's damage control. Plus there's the lay of the land. Where's it at now? What do I do now? What route do I go? And I've got no, I've signed a deal with the Sauerland brothers, who had no TV deals in the UK. So it's like, am I going to go to Germany? Am I going to fight on someone else's show? I'm going to have to carve out my own deal. So yeah, no, it was really hard, really hard. We got back to work straight away. It felt like the best thing to do would be to make up for lost ground, chase it, and then. Within a week, I was talking to Kala, and we was like, well, how about WBC? And he said, yep. And they got on to WBC. Their contacts there. Spoke to the president, Richard Solomon, and worked on it. I met Solomon out in Vegas at WBC convention, and he was happy for me to fight for a final eliminator for WBC in my next fight, which ended up being Christoph Fabras for the European title. So, like in many things in life, you might just quickly dust yourself off, get back to work. Like, just didn't go your way, don't dwell on it, don't sulk on it, get back to work. The dream was still there, the ambition was still there. Carrying around some heartache now, just when the baggage is really sort of starting. But is what it is. But I knew the first massive lull in my career. I'd had a bit of heartache not getting selected for the Olympics. But obviously I'd had heartache from getting robbed in the first fight. But as I say, didn't feel like a clear loss. This is it.
Just to round off on Carl Froch though, before we move on, even though there was heartbreak in the first fight and even more in the second, grateful for the experience when you look back on it. I mean, as I said, it was one of the best moments of that period in British boxing because of the two fights with yourself and Carl. And how do you rectify things with Carl? Because obviously you're very good mates now.
Yeah, I mean, I hated Carl more so after the first fight, and then more so again after the second fight than I did. Let me say that again, sorry. So I hated Carl more after the second fight than I did before any of it because it was like, and he probably hated me just as much. Like, it was weird for him, he couldn't let it go. But time goes on, I put my stuff aside. I have my career, and I get enough out of my career to be more than happy, more than content. And then by then, I can lower the guard a bit. And me and Carl, we started doing a bit of work together on Sky. which sort of cut through the ice, killed the tension. And then we've done tours together. We spent quite a lot of time together, so we've ended up becoming quite good friends. And we are very similar in some ways, that we are retired ex-fighters navigating our world now in after boxing. So, yeah, I appreciate Carl. And it was weird. I think all he ever really wanted from me was me to acknowledge what he'd done and therefore give him the respect for that. And I never did it while we were boxing. So afterwards, we was on tour, and I'm like, yeah, of course, bloody hell, he went here, he'd done that, he'd done this, he'd done that. I said, it's amazing. And then all of a sudden, like, his shoulders loosened. He was like, you've never said that to me before. I've never heard that before. And I was like, well, it's the truth. I know. I'm not going to deny it. And I appreciate him, because he had to do it the hard way, in many times. And he would, it was only right until the end where he probably felt like he was really getting the praise and accolades that he felt he deserved, which would have been when he was fighting Kessler in the rematch. But before then, I know he had to go on the road through the Super 6, and he had to fight Pascal, and when he had to travel to the States and fight, get off the floor to beat Jermaine Taylor. I appreciate that. So good for him. Yeah.
Well, going on to November 2016, weirdly, this would have been a low point for you. You got the unanimous decision win against Eduard Gutknecht, but really, can't really talk about the fight itself, because obviously what happened afterwards, straight after, went to hospital, Eduard, and, I believe he was in hospital for a long time, George. So how was that, dealing with that situation, obviously not on purpose, but knowing that you've done that to another human and he's in a critical state? How was that for you, dealing with that?
Yeah, that was awful. So I'd just become mandatory for the WBA world title. So then I'd already lost Badu Jack out in the States. So this is like the fourth attempt, the fourth and final attempt coming up. But we couldn't make the fight straight away because there was, I think it was Chudinov had fought Storm, and Storm had tested positive. Someone had, I can't remember. It wasn't Fedor, but so we have a Keep Busy fight. It's on Channel 5. It's with Cyclone, and I'm training now with Shane McGuigan. So it's all sort of just a nice, neat and tidy Keep Busy fight. I'm not going to get in no sort of, no well beaters. But Eddie Gutknecht fit the bill. Good record, a couple of losses. Had an amateur win over Gennady Golovkin. So it's like, he knew how to fight. German based, solid fighter. He came over, seemed like a lovely guy. He had 3 kids, which was like, didn't mean much to me before the fight, but after, you're like, it's horrific. And I'd become a dad, so I'd become a dad that summer, my first child, and yeah, that softens you. I mean, changes you. Anyone will tell you who is a parent. You become a parent, you sort of see the world through different eyes. Boxing's all about being selfish and ruthless, and it's hard to be that and be a parent if you are a real parent, because most fighters you speak to say they're fighting for their kids. So yeah, the fight happens. It's a funny fight, because it's like, it's a nothing fight. I'm winning the fight. It's comfortable enough. There's not enough really going on where the referee could have pulled it. The corner, I think, could have threw in the towel, definitely after the halfway point. And he's not going to get paid any more for staying in any longer. He's not in it. He's not going to win at this point. And yeah, the fight finishes. Seems okay. It's like, oh, right, well, I'm not going to increase my value with this fight, but yeah, job's done. Nice, let's go. A few rounds under the belt. Get into the changing room, and then we're told that Eddie's collapsed in his changing room, which is, as a fighter, you know what that means. It's like, okay, that's really bad. That's really, really bad. They rushed him to hospital. He'd had a bleed on the brain, I believe. They put him into a coma. Me and Nissa Sala went to visit him on I think it was a Wednesday, and he was still in Paddington Hospital, still in a coma. And at that point, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like, is he going to come around? Is he not? I'd sparred Nick Blackwell before his fight with Eubank, and it wasn't that long after their fight, and he'd collapsed, but he'd sort of made a full recovery. So he was like, well, maybe that's what people do now. Times have moved on. Technology's better. They get to people quicker. It'd be okay. But sadly for Eddie, it wasn't. He was in London for a few weeks, I think. Then they flew him back to his home in Germany. I'm not sure when they brought him out of the coma, but they did. And yeah, that was obviously not just the end of his boxing. It's like his life's now changed forever. So it's really sad. And I haven't been in touch with the family for a long time, which is something I should change. But I stayed in touch with the family. We tried to help them a little bit. We get updates, and selfishly for me, it's sad. It's sad. It's really sad. It's not what you get into boxing for. You realise that as an adult, and as a parent, you're like, well, boxing ain't worth it for me if that's the risks, because my kids would rather me be a dad than, I don't know, have some money or something, or have their parent on the TV. So no, it was awful, horrific, and yeah, I think there and then I realised. I mean, I had many ups and downs and many exit strategies from boxing, but that was like, right, you got a world title fight next, but the clock is ticking. Like you don't need to be lingering in this sport for much longer, and I'm probably only about 28 at this point. So.
Is he fully well now? Has he ever?
As far as I'm aware, no. He's like he can walk, but he can't walk. Do you know what I mean? He needs a wheelchair. He can talk. He can probably say a few words, but he can't talk. The last update I had, I don't think he could feed himself. Like he's got brain damage. He's got like severe brain damage, but he's made a lot of improvements. I think he's naturally a fit man, strong man. So and they would, as I say, I should touch in with them guys and see how he's doing. But I'd get updates from the friends and the guys he was working with, and I think they successfully got some compensation from the British Boxing Board of Control. So hopefully that's helped them as well. But yeah, that's it. It's not, you don't make a full recovery in boxing. He's unless things have changed, I don't think they will. He's Michael Watson. He's not Spencer Oliver.
Well, yeah, a very tough moment for everyone involved, really, on that night. Right, going to possibly what I'm going to guess was your biggest high, May 2017, the fight with Fedor Chudinov, bagging that world title finally. Biggest relief in the world?
Yeah, biggest relief in the world. Yeah, I mean, you could just, the weight of the world lifted from your shoulders. It was an incredible feeling. The fight gets made. So the WBA ordered a fight. The Sauerland brothers successfully negotiate for Chudinov to come to the UK. We fight on a Kelbrook pay-per-view up in Bramwell Lane as chief support, which is great for me because I'd fought chief support on a Mayweather card against Badu Jack, but it was out in Vegas, And before then, I'd headlined the big events, against Froch, which is what you want, obviously. World title, you want to headline, you want to be the man. But this just felt right. It felt like, well, I don't mind being undercard. I don't mind fighting under Kell Brooks, in Kell Brooks' backyard. And that it relieves a bit of pressure. But I have got home advantage because Chudinov's got to come to the UK. And we'd seen Chudinov, and he was tough, but he looked hittable. He didn't look like he did anything exceptionally well. I remember I've done a lot of sparring with Frank Buglioni, and I like Frank. We'd been friends for a long time, and they'd asked him in an interview. It might have been Steve Bunce or someone else. Like, they've made the Chudinov-Groves fight. Who do you think's going to win? And he'd fought Chudinov, and he dropped Chudinov, but it hit him sort of on the bell. Got up, and he got beat by Chudinov. And I thought he would say, straight away, he would go, yeah, it's a good fight, but I think Groves wins pretty comfortably because we've done a lot of sparring. And he didn't. He sort of went, oh, well, I think da-da-da-da. And I thought, that's not like Frank. He's not protecting his loss. Fucking Chudinov must be pretty good. There must be something about him that we ain't quite seen yet. And he was unbeaten. He had a loss against Storm, but he got robbed in that. He only had a handful of fights. Strong Russian fighter. The fight's made. We come out ring walk. It's now or never. Do or die. I've had the Chudinov fight. I've had the Eddie Gutknecht fight. I've had the highs and lows of Froch and Badu Jack, and DeGale, and all these other experiences. And I'd signed into the tournament that if I win this fight, then I've got my exit strategies booked. So the pressure's on. I've got to win. I've got to win. Get my jaw broke at the end of the third round. I get a cut over the left eye at the end of the fourth round or halfway through the fourth round. But again, it's like, just get on with it. It's now or never. And then momentarily stunned Chudinov in the sixth round. I walk him onto a nice right hand, just a little drop back right hand. Same shot I landed on Froch, same shot I've landed throughout my career. And then there's a slight pause, and I think, right, well, it's now or never. It's now or never, and I just start raining in punches. And at that point, I'm thinking, no one's going to accuse me of conditioning problems or gassing out. I'm just going to keep punching until they turn the lights off. And I do, and I think it's 30 odd unanswered punches. Steve Gray, the referee, calls a halt to the action, and at the fourth attempt, finally become champion of the world, which was the biggest relief of all time.
I bet. And the last fight we're going to talk about, February 2018, in the World Boxing Super Series, another British blockbuster with Chris Eubank Jr. Not as intense sort of as the DeGale or Froch fights, the rivalry and beef, and we know you guys get on now, you and Junior, but to sell the fight, etc. There was Needle. Eubanks is great at selling a fight. So is his dad, of course. The fight itself with Chris Eubank Jr. People were still unsure about Eubank then. Obviously, we knew your credentials. You were proven. So, were you a bit clueless about what you were facing in that ring with Eubank Jr.?
No, I've done a lot of sparring with Eubank. I knew Eubank, and he's a middleweight, but he'd moved up to super middleweight. So he's a strong guy, but not tall, and he's not well schooled in terms of his amateur background. He had a handful of amateur fights and then turned pro, and then the vast majority of his pro career, he felt like he was sort of training himself, which is an exceptional thing to do, something to respect. Not many people out there could get the work out of themselves, but he could do that. And they'd done a great job on selling Eubank at that point. The sale started probably 2 years before. He wants to do his own thing, his own sort of setup. He has his ITV deal. One of the fights, he has a couple of fights there, but he beats Arthur Abraham, who just comes over sort of and doesn't throw a punch. But off the back of that, they sell him to go into the tournament, and by the time he gets to me, because he has a really good win against Avni Yildirim, people think he's going to win. And again, I'm like, no one here, everyone asleep at the wheel, no one been listening, no one's seen anything that I've done. But I'm mature now, you know, I've got the belt. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I'm not chasing anything anymore. Everyone's chasing me. You know, I'm probably ranked, it was either before or directly after the Eubank fight. I think it was before. I'm the number 1 super-middleweight in the world now with Ring Magazine. It was one of them ones where I think the tournament would have loved it to have been a bit more spicy. But for me, even engaging with Eubank was like a win for him. So I don't need to. And if he was like, I think he wanted to try and get under my skin, but that's not. No one ever really does. So we were good, and the fight was sold really well. Done mega numbers on ITV pay-per-view. Like, you know, they put on a lot of the fights in the series on ITV pay-per-view, and they've done a few before. But considering it's not a channel that people are familiar for paying for, the fight was huge. Sold out the Manchester Arena. There's a lot of drama in the fight. Obviously, my shoulder gets blown out in the last round, which makes it really interesting. But it's a fight that we were more than confident about. At this point, I'm training with Shane McGuigan. I'm in the McGuigan gym. I'm surrounded by winners, and we are winning. We're doing well. I think I must have had 6 fights with Shane now, unbeaten, and gone through the levels, and now we're champion of the world.
Outclassed him really on the night, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, boxing. So, I'm blow my own trumpet, right? But I'm a good fighter. Like, I'm a very, very good fighter at this point as well. I'm vast experience. I've been all around the world as an amateur fighting, and I've worked with a lot of different coaches. And you know, I'd worked with Adam Booth intensely, you know, on being that one shot, you know, exploding sort of like David Haye type fight. And then I'd worked with Paddy, who told me he used to lay in the gym in LA at Freddie Roche's gym and watch James Toney come in and just destroy sparring partner for sparring partner. So that was what he loved, and that's what we worked on, sitting in the pocket and punching. And now I'm with Shane and I'm doing something else. So sure, when Eubank, I'm gonna keep it at my distance, at my range. He's gonna fall over his front foot. He's gonna come in swinging. He's gonna be mad uppercuts and mad hooks. We're gonna catch him fire as soon as he gets close. Watch the inside work. Like, watch the inside, because there's loads of times where we come together. But you'll see, if one of his arms gets taken, my hand's up and covering. So I'm not holding. That's holding. That's up and covering, right? And from there, I'm punching away with the left hand. If it comes the other way, vice versa. I catch everything. I slip everything. I take an angle. It's a really good clinical performance from me, that fight. One of my best. It's drama, as I say, the shoulder blows out, and Eubank's always going to be in those sort of fights because he can't close the distance that well with his jab, so he has to get into range and let his hands go. If you're going to trade with him, you might come unstuck. Very strong. Punch power is decent, hand speed's very good, but gets himself into the ground strong. Chin's not bad. I think I hurt him in that fight. I don't expect him to ever admit it, but I think I hurt him. I think I hurt him early. He carries a shot well, as in he doesn't show it. You know, we've seen the fight since with Smith where he's actually gone, but up until that point, no one's really ever hurt him like that. Where his legs have gone, but I think I hurt him in that fight a few times, and I think that's why he can't close the distance, because he's going to walk on something, and I'm always there to change and adjust the distance and fire back. And then when you know, you've been in the ring long enough, you get that you got those instincts of when someone's not feeling it, when someone's hurt, you need to press someone. You press someone with faints and twitching, so you might just try and twitch them out, get the anxiety levels high. Sometimes you have to hit them. Sometimes you just have to hit the gloves, or hit the arms, or just whack away at something. But yeah, no, it was a really good fight for me. Eubank, good comfortable win.
12th round, just use the left hand.
Yeah, 12th round. So 12th round, I think it happens in the 11th where something happens. Weird thing. So on the night, I remember just a weird feeling in my shoulder, and I'm sure it happens in the 11th round. But then don't say nothing to Shane. Almost forget about it. And then in the 12th, yeah, I can feel it go out and in, and I think to myself, right, don't throw left arm anymore. I think you've got a bad shoulder, but I don't. I think it'd be all right. And I'd throw a long looping jab, punch the shoulder out of its socket, and then it don't go back in, which was not ideal. And I remember thinking, I hope everyone can see that my shoulder's out. So yeah, I think I'll go southpaw for a couple of seconds, then not. It's last round, so Eubank knows he's behind. He's got to come for it. So it made for a really good, saucy last round. It would have been sweet if I could have dropped him with a right hook or something. I landed a couple, but we're way too into the fight then for anyone to sort of walk onto something and get caught cold. But yeah, it was interesting last round.
Well, listen, George, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking about the fights that made you. Just to finish off on this podcast, we have a little wildcard question. So, as an ex-fighter yourself, if you could have shared the ring with anyone from the history of the sport, who would it have been and why?
Plenty. Yeah, I think, British greats are like Joe Calzaghe, so I'd love to have measured myself against him. And then they're not super middleweights, but like the Hagler, the Gerald McLennans, the Julian Jacksons, that sort of era of big, strong middle / maybe super middles. They probably would have done super middle in this day and age. So those guys would have been an exceptional person to have showed it. Oh, and also Andre Ward. I think I'd love to have figured out Andre Ward. I could have figured him out.
That wraps up today's episode of the Fights That Made Me podcast. Please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
To not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day,